I watched my restaurant burn. The flames rose into the night sky like angry spirits, consuming everything I'd built over 40 years. The heat pressed against my face even from across the street, where the police had pushed us back behind yellow tape. Firefighters shouted to each other, their hoses spraying arcs of water that seemed pitiful against the inferno. My legs trembled, but I couldn't look away. Inside those walls were my life, my history, my only source of income at 72 years old. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Mom, maybe you should sit down. My daughter Yvonne's voice came from somewhere to my left, but she didn't touch me. She never did anymore. I'm fine, I whispered, though I wasn't sure she heard me over the roar of the fire. This is really unfortunate timing, my son Alexander said, his phone glowing in his hand. We have the Johnsons' anniversary party next weekend. I'll have to find another caterer. I turned to look at him. In the orange glow of the flames, his face looked harder than I remembered, sharper at the edges. When had that happened? When had my children become people who looked at my burning life's work and thought first about their inconvenience? Alexander, Yvonne said quietly, not in reproach, in warning. He glanced at me, then away. I'm just saying, it's going to be difficult. The restaurant, Bar's Garden, though my married name was Kim, had been struggling for years. My husband Gerald had died 8 years ago, leaving me with building repairs I couldn't afford and equipment that broke down more often than it worked. My children had both suggested, more than once, that I should sell. Retire, Mom, Yvonne would say. You've earned it. What she meant was, stop embarrassing us with your shabby little restaurant in this neighborhood that's gentrifying around you. I'd opened Bar's Garden in 1985, 2 years after emigrating from Taiwan. Gerald had been a good man, an American veteran who'd met me while stationed overseas, but he'd never understood the restaurant business. That had been mine alone. The recipes, the relationships with suppliers, the careful balance of flavors that kept customers coming back. We'd never been fancy. We'd never been trendy, but we'd been steady, reliable, a place where families celebrated birthdays and where construction workers grabbed lunch. Until tonight. Do they know how it started? Yvonne asked, directing the question past me to a police officer standing nearby. Arson, the officer said grimly. There's accelerant. We can smell it. My knees buckled. Yvonne caught my elbow, her grip efficient and brief. Who would do this? I asked, but I was talking to myself more than anyone else. The officer's radio crackled. He stepped away, speaking in low tones. Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then at me. I need to take this. It's about the Henderson contract. He walked away without waiting for a response, his voice shifting into the smooth, confident tone he used for business. Yvonne stayed beside me, but I could feel her restlessness, the way she kept checking her own phone, the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot. She had 3 children at home, a husband who was probably wondering where she was, a life that didn't include standing on a street corner watching her mother's world collapse. You should go, I told her. The kids. I can stay a little longer. But she couldn't. Not really. And I didn't want her to stay out of obligation, that particular brand of resentment disguised as duty. Go, I said more firmly. I'll be fine. I'll take a taxi back to your father's sister's place. I'd been living in the small apartment above the restaurant for years, but Aunt Diane had offered me her spare room 6 months ago when the building's plumbing had failed. It was temporary. Everything felt temporary now. Yvonne hesitated, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like guilt cross her face. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at it, and I could see her decide. Call me tomorrow, she said. We'll figure something out. She kissed my cheek quickly and left, her heels clicking against the pavement as she hurried toward her car. Alexander returned as Yvonne's taillights disappeared around the corner. That was important, he said, as if I'd questioned him. Mom, look, this is terrible, but maybe it's a sign. The insurance money. There is no insurance money, I said quietly. He stared at me. What? I couldn't afford the premiums. I let the policy lapse 6 months ago. The silence between us stretched long. I watched emotions flicker across his face. Shock, anger. Something that might have been disappointment but looked more like disgust. Jesus, Mom. He caught himself, cleared his throat. I mean, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped. This was a lie, and we both knew it. When I'd mentioned struggling with expenses last Christmas, Alexander had launched into a lecture about fiscal responsibility. Yvonne had offered to look at my books, as if I were a child who didn't understand basic mathematics. Neither had offered money. Neither had offered help. It's done now, I said. You'll stay with Yvonne and Robert, Alexander said, making the decision for me, for them. Or, well, we don't really have space, with the new baby and Ashley's mother visiting from Seattle. But Yvonne's place is bigger. I didn't argue. There was no point. The fire captain approached us, his face smudged with soot. Mrs. Kim, we've got it under control now. I'm sorry to say there's not much left. The building's structure is compromised. You won't be able to go inside. Do you know who did it? Alexander asked. There'll be an investigation. If you have any enemies, anyone who might have wanted to hurt you or your business, you should tell the police. Enemies? At 72, running a small Chinese restaurant in a neighborhood where I'd known many families for decades, did I have enemies? I thought of Tommy Brennan, the developer who'd been buying up properties on the block. He'd approached me 5 times in the last 2 years, each offer lower than the last, each delivery more aggressive. The last time, 3 weeks ago, he'd leaned across my counter and said, "Lady, you're sitting on a gold mine, and you're too stubborn to cash it in. One way or another, this block is changing." But surely he wouldn't. Mom? Alexander was looking at me. Do you know something? There's a developer, I said slowly. Tommy Brennan. He's been trying to buy my property. The fire captain nodded, making a note. We'll look into it. In the meantime, do you have somewhere safe to stay? She's staying with family, Alexander said quickly. I let him speak for me. I let him guide me toward his car, his hand barely touching my back. I let him drive me to Aunt Diane's small apartment in silence, the radio playing soft jazz that felt obscene in its cheerfulness. When he pulled up to the curb, he didn't turn off the engine. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. We'll figure this out. I nodded and climbed out of his car, my joints aching, my clothes smelling of smoke. Aunt Diane buzzed me in without questions. She was 90, my late husband's aunt, and she'd long ago stopped being surprised by life's cruelties. She simply made me tea and sat with me in her small living room, her hand patting mine occasionally, her presence the only comfort I had. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window and watched the sky gradually lighten, thinking about the restaurant, thinking about all the meals I'd cooked, all the people I'd fed, all the small moments of connection I'd facilitated. Gone now. All of it gone. And I thought about something else, something I hadn't thought about in years. A memory that surfaced unbidden in the dark hours of the morning. It had been 1993. No, 1994. The summer of the Great Flood, when the river had jumped its banks and swallowed half the downtown in muddy water. My restaurant had been on slightly higher ground, just above the floodline. I'd watched the water creep up the street, watched families evacuate with whatever they could carry, and I'd watched a young woman, heavily pregnant, struggling through knee-deep water with a toddler on her hip. I hadn't thought about her in years. Why was I thinking about her now? The memory felt important somehow, like a message I was supposed to understand. But exhaustion was making me foggy, making connections where there might be none. When dawn finally came, I was still sitting by the window, watching the city wake up, wondering what I was going to do with the rest of my life. The smell of smoke had embedded itself in my hair, my skin, my clothes. Even after a long shower at Aunt Diane's, I could still sense it, as if the fire had marked me permanently. I stood in her tiny bathroom, staring at my reflection in the steamed mirror. 72 years old, lines etched deep around my eyes and mouth, gray hair that I'd stopped dyeing years ago when Gerald died, when vanity seemed beside the point. When had I become invisible? My phone buzzed on the counter. Yvonne. Mom, I talked to Robert. You can stay with us for a while. We'll move Madison into Sophie's room and you can have the small bedroom. It's not ideal, but thank you, I said, cutting her off before she could list all the reasons why housing me was an inconvenience. I'll manage something else. Don't be proud. You literally have nowhere else to go. She was right, of course, but the thought of living in Yvonne's immaculate house, with her silent disapproval hanging in every room, made my chest tighten. I'll figure something out, I repeated. Yvonne sighed, the long-suffering sound she'd perfected over the years. Alexander called. He says you let the insurance lapse. Mom, how could you be so irresponsible? The premium increased by 40%, I said quietly. I had a choice between insurance and paying my suppliers. I chose to keep the restaurant running. And now you have nothing. The words hung between us, true and cruel in equal measure. I have to go, Yvonne said. Sophie has gymnastics. But seriously, think about my offer. Pride won't keep you housed and fed. After she hung up, I sat on Aunt Diane's couch and stared at the wall. The television murmured in the background. Some morning show with hosts who laughed too loudly at things that weren't funny. Aunt Diane shuffled in from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of tea. She moved slowly, carefully, the way very old people do when they know their bones might betray them. She handed me a cup and settled into her recliner with a soft grunt. You're thinking too hard, she said. I can hear it from the other room. Everything I built is gone. Buildings burn. People endure. She sipped her tea. You know what Gerald used to say about you? I shook my head. He said you were the strongest person he'd ever met. Said you came to a foreign country with nothing, learned a new language, built a business from scratch. He said you had steel in your spine. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I'd cried enough last night. That was a long time ago. I'm not that person anymore. You're exactly that person. You're just tired. Aunt Diane set down her cup. I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. Tommy Brennan came by here 2 days ago. I turned to stare at her. What? He knocked on my door, asked if I knew you. Said he'd been trying to reach you about a business opportunity. I told him to leave you alone. Her jaw set stubbornly. He didn't like that. Said something about how old ladies like us didn't understand how the world works now. Said the neighborhood was changing whether we liked it or not. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. You should have told me. I'm telling you now, that man, there's something wrong with him. His eyes are mean. I thought about the fire, about the accelerant the police had mentioned. But accusing someone of arson was serious. I had no proof. Just a developer who'd been aggressive and a fire that was suspiciously well-timed. My phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number. Mrs. Kim? A woman's voice, professional and brisk. This is Detective Alexis Johnson from the Fire Investigation Unit. I'd like to ask you some questions about last night. Would you be available to come to the station this afternoon? Kim. The irony wasn't lost on me. My maiden name. The name I'd kept for the restaurant even after marrying Gerald. Of course, I said. What time? 2 o'clock? Ask for me at the front desk. After I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking. Aunt Diane noticed. I'll come with you, she said. You don't have to. Tilly. She only used my full name when she was serious. You held this family together when Gerald died. You took care of him through the cancer. You paid for the funeral. You never asked anyone for help. Let someone help you now. So that afternoon, Aunt Diane and I took the bus to the police station. She insisted on the bus rather than bothering Alexander or Yvonne, and I was grateful. The bus gave me time to think, to watch the city pass by the windows, to remember what it had been like 30 years ago. The flood had been catastrophic. I remembered the news coverage, the emergency shelters, the National Guard trucks rumbling through the streets. My restaurant had become a kind of refuge for people who lived nearby, a dry island where I'd served free soup and rice to anyone who came through the door. And I remembered her, the young woman, maybe 25 years old, her belly round and tight with pregnancy. She'd been crying, holding a little boy who couldn't have been more than 3. They'd appeared at my door late one evening, soaked through, shivering. Please, she'd said in English heavily accented with Spanish. Please, do you have food? For my son? I'd brought them inside immediately, fed them, given them dry clothes, and when I'd learned they had nowhere to go, that her apartment had flooded, and her husband was away working in another state, unable to get back through the closed roads, I'd made a decision. Stay here, I'd told her, in the back room, until the water goes down. She'd stayed for a month. I'd fed her family, let them sleep in the storage room that I'd converted with blankets and a space heater. She'd tried to help in the kitchen despite her pregnancy, but I'd insisted she rest. When the floodwaters finally receded and the roads reopened, I'd given her money, $200, which was a lot for me then, so she could buy bus tickets back to her hometown in Texas, where her family lived. I will remember, she'd said, holding my hands, tears streaming down her face. I will never forget your kindness. I'd waved away her thanks. Take care of yourself. Take care of your babies. I'd never seen her again. Never even learned her last name. Maria. That was all I'd known. Maria with the sad eyes and the determined chin, who'd squeezed my hand so tightly before she left. Why was I thinking about her so much? Maybe because loss makes you remember other losses, other moments of vulnerability. Maybe because when your present crumbles, your past becomes more vivid. Detective Johnson turned out to be a woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed and direct. She led us to a small interview room and offered us coffee, which we declined. Mrs. Kim, I've been reviewing the evidence from last night. The fire was definitely arson. Someone poured gasoline around the back entrance and along the side wall, then lit it. Do you have security cameras? I did. They haven't worked in a year. I couldn't afford to fix them. Detective Johnson made a note. You mentioned a developer who'd been pressuring you to sell. Tommy Brennan? Yes. He was persistent, sometimes aggressive. Tell me about the last conversation you had with him. I recounted the interaction 3 weeks ago, his leaning across the counter, his barely veiled threat about the neighborhood changing one way or another. Detective Johnson's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. We're looking into Mr. Brennan. He's been involved in several property disputes in this area. Nothing we could prove, but there have been complaints. She paused. Mrs. Kim, I need to ask. Do you have adequate housing right now? Family you can stay with? I'm staying with my late husband's aunt temporarily. My children have offered, but... I stopped, unsure how to explain the complicated dynamics without sounding bitter. But it's complicated, Detective Johnson finished gently. I understand. Family often is. Aunt Diane spoke up suddenly. Her children don't appreciate her. They're ashamed of her restaurant, ashamed that she works for a living at her age. They wanted her to sell and retire, move into some senior facility where they wouldn't have to think about her. Diane, I started, horrified. But Detective Johnson was nodding. I see. Mrs. Kim, the investigation will take time. In the meantime, I'd advise you to document everything. Any interactions you've had with Brennan, any witnesses who might have seen suspicious activity around your restaurant. And if he contacts you again, you call me immediately. She handed me her card. As we left the station, Aunt Diane squeezed my arm. Someone needed to say it. You didn't need to air our family problems to a stranger. She's not investigating your family. She's investigating a crime. But she needed to understand your situation. Aunt Diane stopped on the sidewalk, breathing heavily. The walk had tired her more than she wanted to admit. Tilly, your children love you. They just don't know how to show it anymore. They got comfortable, forgot where they came from. You sacrificed so they could have better lives, and now they can't see the sacrifice. They just see an old woman clinging to a failing business. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should have let go years ago. Maybe. But it wasn't their choice to make. It was yours. We rode the bus back in silence. When we got back to the apartment, there was a black luxury sedan parked in front of the building. Sleek, expensive, completely out of place in this neighborhood. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, looking at a piece of paper, then at the building, then back at the paper. When they saw us approaching, they straightened. "Excuse me," one of them called out. He was maybe 40, tall, with dark hair graying at the temples. "Are you Tilly Kim? Used to be Tilly Barr?" My heart began to pound. Something about his face was familiar, but I couldn't place it. "I am," I said cautiously. The 2 men exchanged a look. The second man, slightly younger, pulled out his phone and showed me something. A photograph. Old, faded, clearly taken decades ago. It showed my restaurant, and standing in front of it, a young woman with a round belly, holding a toddler, standing next to me. "Mrs. Kim," the first man said, his voice suddenly thick with emotion. "We've been looking for you for 10 years. I stared at the photograph on the phone screen, my vision blurring at the edges. The young woman in the picture looked so vulnerable, so desperate. And I looked younger too. Not young. I'd been 42 then, but younger than I felt now. My hair had still been black. My shoulders hadn't yet curved forward with the weight of years. "I don't understand," I whispered. The first man, the one with gray at his temples, stepped closer. "Mrs. Kim, my name is Dominic Rodriguez. This is my brother, Carlos. That woman in the photograph is our mother, Maria Rodriguez." The name hit me like a physical blow. Maria, of course. "The flood," I said. 1994. "Yes?" Dominic's eyes were bright, suspiciously so. "You sheltered our mother for a month. You fed us. You gave her money to get home. You asked for nothing." "It was nothing," I said automatically. "Anyone would have—" "No." Carlos spoke for the first time, his voice firm. "Not anyone. Most people turned her away. You were the only one who opened your door." Aunt Diane's hand found my elbow, steadying me. "Maybe we should go inside," she suggested quietly. The brothers followed us up to Aunt Diane's apartment. In the small living room, they looked impossibly large, impossibly polished. Their suits probably cost more than I'd made in 6 months. Their watches gleamed. Everything about them spoke of success, of money, of a world I didn't inhabit. Dominic sat forward on the couch, his hands clasped between his knees. "Mrs. Kim, I need to tell you something. When we left your restaurant that summer, when you gave our mother that money, she was running from our father. He was abusive, dangerous. She was trying to get us somewhere safe." I felt my chest tighten. I'd known something was wrong, had seen the fear in her eyes, but I hadn't asked questions. I'd just tried to help. "The money you gave her," Carlos continued, "it was enough to buy bus tickets to our grandmother's house in El Paso. Our mother was able to divorce our father, start over. She found work as a seamstress. She raised us alone, and she never forgot you. Every year on the anniversary of the flood," Dominic said, "she would tell us the story about the Chinese lady who took us in when we had nothing, who didn't ask questions, who didn't judge. She said you saved us. I just gave you a room," I protested. "Some food. It was everything." Dominic pulled out his phone again, swiped through photos, then turned it to face me. An older woman, her hair silver, her face lined but beautiful. She was smiling, surrounded by children. Grandchildren, I assumed. "That's our mother. Last Christmas." I looked at the photo, trying to reconcile this serene grandmother with the terrified young woman I'd sheltered 30 years ago. "She's beautiful," I said softly. "She is. And she's strong. Like you." Carlos leaned forward. "Mrs. Kim, we've been trying to find you for 10 years. Ever since we became successful enough to start looking. But your restaurant was listed under Bar's Garden, and your legal name was Kim. It took us years to make the connection. We finally found you 6 months ago." My heart stuttered. 6 months? "We've been planning something. A way to thank you, to honor what you did for our family." Dominic's expression grew pained. "And then last night, we saw the news. Your restaurant. The fire. The room seemed to tilt." Aunt Diane's hand tightened on my shoulder. "We drove here immediately," Carlos said. "We were at the scene this morning before dawn. We talked to the fire marshal. We saw what was left." He paused. "Mrs. Kim, we want to help you." "I don't need charity," I said, the words automatic, defensive. "It's not charity." Dominic's voice was gentle but insistent. "It's repayment. It's justice. You gave our mother a chance at life. Let us give you something back." "I don't even know you," I said, but my voice was shaking. "That's fair. We're strangers to you. But you weren't a stranger to our mother when she needed help. You didn't ask for references or credentials. You just helped." Carlos pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to me. "We own Rodriguez Brothers Construction. We specialize in commercial development and restoration. I looked at the card. The logo was elegant, professional, an address in the business district downtown. We want to rebuild your restaurant, Dominic said. Not just rebuild it, make it better. Modern equipment, proper ventilation, updated electrical, everything you need to run a successful restaurant for years to come. The words didn't make sense. They were too big, too generous, too impossible. I can't accept that, I whispered. Why not? Because I struggled to find words. Because it's too much. Because I don't deserve— You deserve everything, Carlos interrupted, his voice suddenly fierce. You deserve everything good. Do you know what our mother did when she finally had money saved? She tried to find you. She wanted to repay you. But your restaurant phone number had changed, and she didn't know your last name. She looked for years. When she finally gave up, she made us promise we'd keep looking. Find the Chinese lady, she'd say. Find her and tell her thank you. Tears were streaming down my face now. I couldn't stop them. Your mother, I managed to say. Where is she? I'd like to see her. The brothers exchanged a glance, and my heart sank. She passed away 2 years ago, Dominic said quietly. Cancer. Fast and aggressive. She died knowing we were still looking for you, but she never got to thank you herself. His voice broke. That's why we need to do this. For her. Because she can't. Aunt Diane was crying too. I could hear her sniffling beside me. I'm so sorry, I said. She was so young. So full of life. She lived a good life because of you, Carlos said. She saw us graduate high school, then college. She saw us start our business. She met her grandchildren. None of that would have happened without you. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of history and gratitude filling the small room. There's something else, Dominic said. He pulled out a folder from the briefcase he'd been carrying. We've been investigating Tommy Brennan. I looked up sharply. When we found you 6 months ago, we did research. We learned about the neighborhood, about the development pressure, about Brennan's tactics. We've been quietly documenting everything. He opened the folder, showed me photographs of other buildings on my block, all bearing signs of neglect or vandalism. We think he's been systematically driving out small business owners to buy properties cheap. Your restaurant wasn't the first suspicious fire in this area. Why would you investigate that? I asked. Because we protect what matters to us. And you matter to us. Carlos's jaw was set in a way that reminded me suddenly of his mother, of Maria's determination. We've shared our findings with the police. With Detective Johnson, specifically. You talked to Detective Johnson? This morning. We wanted to make sure she had all the information. We've hired a private investigator who's been tracking Brennan's activities. We have evidence linking him to at least 3 other arsons in this neighborhood over the past 2 years. My mind was reeling. This is too much. I can't process— You don't have to process anything right now, Dominic said gently. You just need to know that you're not alone, that you have people who care what happens to you. My own children don't even— I stopped, horrified at what I'd almost said. But Carlos nodded, understanding in his eyes. We know about your children. We're not trying to replace them, but we are trying to honor our mother's memory by taking care of the woman who took care of her. Aunt Diane spoke up, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in days. These boys want to help you, Tilly. Let them. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Dominic suggested. Say you'll let us show you the plans we've drawn up for the new restaurant. Say you'll have dinner with us and our families so you can see who we are. There's no obligation, Carlos added. If you don't want our help, we'll respect that. But we hope you'll at least consider it. I looked at these 2 men. These successful businessmen who'd spent a decade searching for a woman who'd given their mother shelter during a flood. I thought about Maria, about her desperate face that night she'd appeared at my door. I thought about how easily I could have turned her away. How many people had. Why me? I asked. Why was I the one who helped when so many others didn't? Dominic smiled, and for the first time I saw his mother in his expression. That same gentle warmth. Our mother asked you that once, do you remember? When she was leaving. She said, "Why did you help us?" And you said— The memory surfaced suddenly, clearly. I said, Because someone helped me once. When I first came to this country, someone gave me a chance. This is how we survive. By helping each other. Exactly. Carlos's eyes were shining. You understood what it meant to be desperate and displaced. You understood what kindness could do. And now we want to show that same understanding to you. My phone buzzed. A text from Yvonne. Mom, we need to talk about your living situation. Call me. I looked at the message, then at the two men sitting in Aunt Diane's living room, then at the business card in my hand. I need time, I said finally. This is overwhelming. Yesterday my restaurant burned down. Today you appear and offer to rebuild it. I need time to think. Of course, Dominic said, standing. Take all the time you need. But please, keep our card. Call us when you're ready. Or even if you're not ready but you need something. Anything. A place to stay. Money for expenses. Help dealing with the insurance investigation. We're here. After they left, Aunt Diane and I sat in silence for a long time. That was real, wasn't it? I asked finally. I didn't imagine that. It was real. Aunt Diane's hand found mine. Kindness comes back, Tilly. Maybe not always. Maybe not in ways we expect. But sometimes it does. My phone rang. Alexander this time. Mom, I've been thinking about the restaurant. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe this is your chance to finally retire, move into that senior community Yvonne and I have been researching. You'd have security, activities, people your own age. I looked at the business card in my hand. Rodriguez Brothers Construction. Alexander. I interrupted him gently. I need to go. I'll call you back. But Mom, I'll call you back, I repeated, and ended the call. Aunt Diane was watching me with something like pride in her eyes. You're not going to that senior community, are you? She asked. No, I said slowly, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. No, I'm not. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in Aunt Diane's narrow guest bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning through the impossible events of the day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maria's face, young, frightened, desperate. And then I saw her sons, grown men with kind eyes, and their mother's determination. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. Aunt Diane was already there, sitting at the small table with a cup of chamomile tea. Couldn't sleep either, she said, pushing a second cup toward me. I sat down across from her. Diane, what if this is a mistake? What if I accept their help and it all falls apart? What if my children are right and I should just let go? What do your children know about letting go? Aunt Diane's voice was sharper than usual. Yvonne lives in a house her husband bought. Alexander married money. Neither of them has ever had to struggle the way you have. They don't understand what it means to build something from nothing. They're good people, I said, feeling the need to defend them even though her words stung with truth. They are, but they're not the people you raised them to be. You taught them to work hard, to be kind, to help others. Somewhere along the way, they forgot. She sipped her tea. Or maybe they just got comfortable enough to forget. I don't want to rebuild the restaurant just to prove something to them. Then don't. Rebuild it because you want to. Because you're 72, not 92. Because you still have good years ahead of you. Because those boys are offering you something precious. Not charity, but recognition. They see your worth. Let them honor it. In the morning, I called Detective Johnson. Mrs. Kim, she said, I was going to call you today. We've arrested Tommy Brennan. My breath caught. What? The Rodriguez brothers provided us with substantial evidence. Combined with what we found at the scene and testimony from other property owners, we had enough for an arrest warrant. He's being charged with arson, extortion, and several other crimes. She paused. He's not getting out anytime soon. I don't know what to say. The Rodriguez brothers are thorough. They've been documenting Brennan's activities for months. They gave us everything: photographs, financial records, witness statements. Between you and me, they probably would have made good detectives. There was warmth in her voice. You must have made quite an impression on their mother. After we hung up, I sat holding the phone, feeling something shift inside me. For so long, I'd felt powerless, against time, against age, against the slow erosion of my business and my relevance. But Maria's sons had seen me, had valued what I'd done enough to spend a decade searching, had cared enough to ensure justice was served. I called Dominic Rodriguez. "Mrs. Kim," he answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "How are you?" "I'd like to see the plans," I said. "For the restaurant, if the offer still stands." "It absolutely does. When can we meet?" "Today, if possible. I don't want to wait anymore." We met at their office downtown, a sleek building with glass walls and modern furniture. Carlos and Dominic led me to a conference room where architectural drawings covered a large table. "We took the liberty of designing something," Dominic said, almost apologetically, "based on the footprint of your old building and what we thought you might need. But everything is flexible. This is your restaurant, your vision." I looked at the drawings. They'd kept the essential character, a welcoming storefront, a visible kitchen, an efficient layout. But everything was elevated. Larger windows to let in natural light, a modern ventilation system, an updated kitchen with professional-grade equipment, a small private dining area for special occasions. The timeline would be approximately 6 months, Carlos explained. We'd handle all the permits, all the contractors. We've already spoken with the city about expediting the process given the circumstances. 6 months, I repeated. It felt both impossibly long and incredibly fast. "We know that's a long time to be without income," Dominic said carefully. "We'd like to help with that too. Not as a loan, as an investment in someone who invested in our family when it mattered most." "I can't take your money," I said automatically. "Then consider it payment," Carlos suggested. "We'd like to hire you as a consultant. We're expanding our business into commercial kitchen design for restaurants. Your expertise would be invaluable." I looked at him sharply. "That's not a real job. You're inventing it to give me money." "It's completely real," Dominic said. "We've been talking about this expansion for 2 years. We've done residential and commercial buildings, but restaurants are specialized. Who better to consult than someone who's run a successful restaurant for 40 years? It wasn't that successful. That's why I couldn't pay the insurance. It was successful enough to survive 4 decades in a changing neighborhood, through recessions and competition from chains. That's expertise." Carlos pulled out a contract. "This is a 6-month consulting agreement, 20 hours a week at a very reasonable rate. All you'd need to do is review kitchen designs, offer feedback, maybe visit a few sites, share what you know." I stared at the contract. The salary listed was more than I'd made in a year at the restaurant. "This is too much." "It's market rate for a consultant with your experience," Dominic said firmly. "Take it home, read it, think about it. There's no pressure." But there was pressure. The pressure of gratitude so overwhelming I didn't know how to hold it. The pressure of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. That evening, Yvonne came to visit at Aunt Diane's apartment. She brought food, expensive takeout from a trendy fusion restaurant that tasted of nothing. All style and no substance. "Mom, we need to talk about your future," she said, settling onto the couch with her phone in hand. "I've been researching assisted living facilities. There's a lovely place called Golden Meadows about 40 minutes from here. It has activities, healthcare on site, a dining hall." "I'm not going to an assisted living facility," I said quietly. Yvonne looked up from her phone. "Mom, be reasonable. You have no income, no home, no business. You need stability. I'm rebuilding the restaurant." The words hung in the air. Yvonne stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "You're what?" "Rebuilding. I have investors who want to help." "Investors?" Yvonne's voice rose. "Mom, what are you talking about? Who would invest in a failing restaurant?" "It wasn't failing. It was struggling. There's a difference." "This is insane. You're 72 years old. You should be retiring, not starting over." Yvonne stood up, pacing. "Who are these investors? Have you had them vetted? This could be a scam. Old people are vulnerable to—" "I'm not senile, Yvonne. I didn't say you were. But you're clearly not thinking straight. You've just experienced a trauma. You're not in a position to make major life decisions." Aunt Diane spoke from her recliner, her voice cutting. "Your mother has been making major life decisions since before you were born. She made the decision to leave her home country, to marry your father, to open a business, to raise you and your brother while working 16-hour days. She doesn't need your permission to live her life. Yvonne turned to Aunt Diane, spots of color high on her cheeks. With all due respect, this doesn't concern you. It concerns me because Tilly is living in my home and I see what's happening. You want to put her in a facility so you don't have to think about her anymore. So you don't have to be reminded that she's not the perfect, comfortable grandmother you want her to be. That's not fair, Yvonne protested, but her voice wavered. Isn't it? Aunt Diane leaned forward. When was the last time you visited her restaurant? When was the last time you asked about her life instead of telling her what she should do with it? Yvonne's eyes filled with tears. I'm trying to help her. I'm trying to keep her safe. I don't need to be kept safe, I said softly. I need to be trusted. I need to be respected. I need my children to believe I still have value. Of course you have value. Then stop treating me like I'm incompetent. My voice was gentle but firm. Yvonne, I love you. But I've let you and Alexander make me feel small for too long. I let you convince me that my restaurant was embarrassing, that my work wasn't important, that I should fade quietly into retirement. But I'm not ready to fade. Yvonne sank back onto the couch, wiping her eyes. Who are these investors? I told her about Maria, about the flood, about Dominic and Carlos. I watched her expression shift from skepticism to confusion to something that might have been grudging respect. They're building you a restaurant? For free? Not for free. As repayment for something I did 30 years ago. But you said you just gave their mother shelter for a month. That's... Yvonne struggled for words. That's just being a decent person. Exactly. I was just being decent. And they're being decent back. That's how the world should work. Yvonne was quiet for a long moment. I talked to Alexander about what we said at the fire, about the Henderson contract and the catering and everything. We sounded terrible, didn't we? You sounded like people who've forgotten what really matters. I'm sorry. Yvonne's voice cracked. I'm sorry we made you feel like your life's work was nothing. I'm sorry we weren't there for you the way you've always been there for us. I reached across and took her hand. I know you love me. I know you were trying to help in your own way. But I need you to see me, Yvonne. Not as a burden or a problem to solve. As a person who still has dreams and plans and value. I do see you. Yvonne squeezed my hand. Or I'm trying to. I think maybe I stopped seeing you clearly somewhere along the way. You were always just mom. Always there, always strong, always managing. I forgot you might need something too. I need you to believe in me. I do. Yvonne wiped her face. I want to meet these Rodriguez brothers. I want to see the plans. I want to... She paused. I want to help if you'll let me. Really help. Not just tell you what to do. I'd like that. After Yvonne left, Aunt Diane gave me a long look. That was hard. It was necessary. You know Alexander will be harder to convince. I know. But I'm not asking for his permission. I'm just hoping for his understanding. My phone rang. Dominic Rodriguez. Mrs. Kim, I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted you to know. We stopped by the site today. The building is structurally damaged, but the foundation is solid. That's good news. It means we can rebuild on the same spot. Keep the history. Thank you for telling me. There's something else. We found something in the rubble. The fire marshal gave us permission to retrieve it. His voice grew warm. It's your sign. The original Bar's Garden sign. It's damaged, but we think we can restore it. We'd like to incorporate it into the new restaurant if that's okay with you. I closed my eyes, remembering the day Gerald and I had hung that sign. How proud we'd been. How hopeful. I'd like that very much, I whispered. Good. Because that sign represents something important. It represents survival, legacy, and we want the new restaurant to honor all of that. After we hung up, I sat in the darkening room, feeling something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. It took me a moment to recognize it. Hope. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing insistently. Alexander. I'd been avoiding his calls for 2 days, knowing the conversation would be difficult. But it was time. Mom? Finally, he said when I answered. I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk. I know. I'm sorry I haven't called back. Yvonne told me about this restaurant scheme. Mom, This is crazy. These people you barely know are offering to build you a restaurant? How do you know they're legitimate? How do you know this isn't some elaborate scam? I took a breath, steadying myself. Alexander, come to Aunt Diane's apartment this afternoon. Bring Ashley if she's available. I want to show you something. Mom, please just come. 2:00. He arrived at 1:45, always punctual, always controlled. Ashley wasn't with him. She rarely was anymore, always busy with their children or her own social obligations. He sat stiffly on Aunt Diane's couch, his suit jacket still buttoned, as if he might need to escape at any moment. I laid out the architectural plans on the dining table. I showed him the consulting contract. I pulled up the Rodriguez Brothers construction website on Aunt Diane's laptop, showed him their portfolio of successful projects, their credentials, their business registration. This is real, I said. They're legitimate businessmen. They're not scamming me. Alexander studied the plans, his face unreadable. Even if they're legitimate, this is a huge undertaking. 6 months of construction, learning new equipment, running a restaurant in your 70s. Mom, it's too much. For whom? For me? Or for you? He looked up sharply. What's that supposed to mean? It means I think you're embarrassed. I think you've been embarrassed for years. Your mother, the restaurant owner, in her shabby little building, cooking Chinese food for working-class families. It doesn't fit the image of success you've built for yourself. That's not fair, isn't it? I sat down across from him. Alexander, when was the last time you brought a client to my restaurant? When was the last time you told your colleagues what I do, what I did, for a living? His silence was answer enough. I'm not trying to hurt you, I said more gently. I'm trying to help you see what's been happening. You and Yvonne have been trying to manage me into retirement because my existence makes you uncomfortable, but I'm not ready to disappear. I don't want you to disappear. I want you to be safe, to be comfortable. His voice cracked slightly. Do you know what it's like watching you struggle? Watching you work yourself to exhaustion for a business that was barely breaking even? Then why didn't you help? Why didn't you offer to invest, to update the equipment, to... I stopped, seeing the truth on his face. You wanted it to fail, didn't you? You thought if it got bad enough, I'd finally give up. No, maybe. I don't know. Alexander rubbed his face. I thought you deserved to rest. You've worked your whole life. You raised us. You took care of Dad when he was sick. I thought retirement would be a gift. Retirement isn't a gift if it means being irrelevant. Alexander, I loved that restaurant. I loved feeding people, creating a place where families gathered, where construction workers could get a good meal. I loved being useful. You're still useful. Am I? You don't need me. Yvonne doesn't need me. Your children barely know me. I'm Grandma Tilly, who lives above a restaurant in a bad neighborhood, the one you visit on holidays out of obligation. Alexander's eyes were red. That's not true. Then prove it. Come meet the Rodriguez brothers with me. Look at their plans with an open mind. And if you still think this is a mistake, if you can give me a genuine reason beyond your own discomfort, I'll listen. He was quiet for a long moment. When? Tomorrow. Their office. Noon. I'll be there. After he left, Aunt Diane brought me tea. That was brave. It was overdue. I sipped the tea, feeling exhausted. I've spent so many years trying not to burden them, trying to be the easy, convenient mother. I forgot to be honest. They needed honesty more than convenience. The next day, Dominic and Carlos were gracious when I arrived with Alexander. They shook his hand warmly, offered coffee, and spread out not just the architectural plans, but also their business credentials, references from past clients, and a detailed timeline with cost breakdowns. Mr. Kim, Dominic said, we understand your concerns. If our mother were alive and in your mother's position, we'd be asking the same questions. Alexander studied the documents. This is a substantial investment you're making. What do you expect in return? Nothing beyond what we've stated, Carlos said. We're repaying a debt. Our mother would have wanted this. But surely there's some business arrangement. Profit sharing, ownership stake. The restaurant will be entirely your mother's, Dominic said firmly. We're not investors in that sense. We're not looking for returns. This is personal, not business. Alexander looked at me. Mom, even if their intentions are good, running a restaurant is hard. You'd be starting from scratch. New staff, new suppliers, rebuilding your customer base. I've done it before. 40 years ago. Some things don't change. People still need to eat. They still want good food at fair prices. They still want a place that feels like home. I leaned forward. Alexander, I'm not asking for your permission, but I am asking for your understanding. I need to do this. Not to prove anything to you or Yvonne. To prove something to myself, that I still matter, that I still have something to contribute. Alexander was quiet, his jaw working. Finally, he turned to the Rodriguez brothers. I want to be involved, not in the construction, that's your expertise, but in the business planning, the marketing, the financial management. If my mother is going to do this, I want to help make sure it succeeds. I stared at him, shocked. You'd do that? I asked. I'm good at business, Mom. It's what I do. And maybe, his voice softened, maybe I should have offered to help years ago instead of waiting for things to fail. Carlos smiled. We welcome your involvement, Mr. Kim. Your mother will need a strong team. Over the next 2 weeks, something shifted. Alexander came to Aunt Diane's apartment 3 times, bringing his laptop, reviewing supplier contracts and business plans. Yvonne visited twice, once bringing her daughters to meet Grandma's new friends, as she called the Rodriguez brothers. They seem nice, 10-year-old Sophie said, watching Carlos show her younger sister Madison a photo of their mother. Why are they building you a restaurant? Because I helped their mother a long time ago, I told her. What did you do? I gave her a place to stay when she needed it. Sophie considered this. Like when we let people stay with us during the hurricane last year. Exactly like that. Mom says we should always help people when they need it. But nobody's building us a restaurant. I laughed. Sometimes helping is its own reward, sweetheart. Sometimes the reward comes later, in ways you don't expect. The construction began in early spring. Dominic and Carlos had been true to their word about expediting permits. I visited the site every few days, watching as the damaged structure was carefully dismantled and a new one began to rise in its place. One afternoon, I stood behind the temporary fencing, watching workers pour concrete for the new foundation. A car pulled up beside me, Yvonne's SUV. I thought I'd find you here, she said, joining me at the fence. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the construction. Do you remember when Dad first got sick? Yvonne asked suddenly. You were running the restaurant and taking care of him and you never complained. You just did what needed to be done. I complained plenty. Just not where you could hear. I want to be like that. Strong like that. Yvonne's voice was small. But I don't think I am. You're stronger than you know. You're raising 3 children, managing a household, volunteering at their schools. That takes strength. It's not the same. You built something. You created something that lasted. She gestured at the construction site. You're creating it again. I've never created anything except in my kitchen, and half the time I'm just heating up prepared meals. Yvonne, being a mother is creating something. Every day you're building the people your children will become. I want them to know you better. The real you, not just the grandmother who visits on holidays. I want them to understand what you've done, what you've survived. She turned to face me. I want to help with the restaurant. Not with money or business plans. Alexander's handling that. But with the actual work. Learning your recipes, understanding how you do things, so I can teach my daughters someday. My throat tightened. You want to learn to cook? I want to learn to be you, or at least a version of me that includes the best parts of you. She smiled shakily. Is that weird? It's not weird. It's wonderful. We started meeting twice a week at Aunt Diane's apartment. I taught Yvonne to make the dishes I'd learned from my mother, the ones I'd adapted for American tastes, the ones I'd created myself. She was clumsy at first, her knife work slow, her timing off, but she was patient, willing to try again and again until she got it right. How did you do this every day for 40 years? She asked one afternoon, her hands cramping from kneading dumpling dough. You get used to it, and it stops being work when you love it. Did you always love it? I thought about the question. Not always. Sometimes it was just survival. But most of the time, yes. I loved feeding people. I loved seeing their faces when they tasted something good. I loved being the place where families celebrated. Yvonne was quiet, shaping dumplings with growing confidence. I'm sorry we didn't understand that. I'm sorry we made you feel like it wasn't important. You're understanding it now. That's what matters. One evening, as we were cleaning up, Yvonne's phone rang. She glanced at it and smiled. It's Sophie. She wants to know if she can come to the next cooking lesson. Of course she can. She told her class about you, about the flood and helping that family and the restaurant. Her teacher asked if you'd come speak at their career day. Me? I'm not a career. You're an entrepreneur, a small business owner, a survivor. Yvonne looked at me seriously. You're exactly what those kids need to hear about. Not everyone becomes a doctor or lawyer. Some people build something smaller, but just as valuable. The thought of speaking to a classroom of children was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. I'll think about it. Think yes. Yvonne hugged me quick and tight. I'm proud of you, Mom. I should have said that years ago. As spring turned to summer, the restaurant took shape. The walls rose, the roof went on. Windows were installed, large and welcoming. Inside, the kitchen began to gleam with stainless steel and modern equipment. Dominic and Carlos walked me through every decision, every choice, always deferring to my preferences. What about the sign? I asked one day. My old sign? Dominic smiled. Come with us. They drove me to a restoration workshop where a craftsman had been carefully cleaning and repairing the original bar's garden sign. The painted characters were faded but still visible, the wood weathered but sturdy. We're going to mount it inside, Carlos explained. Above the host stand, a reminder of where you came from and what you built. I traced the characters with my finger, remembering Gerald's pride when we'd first hung it. It's perfect. The grand opening was scheduled for late September, exactly 6 months after the fire. As the date approached, I found myself caught between excitement and terror. What if no one came? What if I'd forgotten how to do this? What if, at 72, I was simply too old to start over? You're spiraling, Aunt Diane observed one evening, watching me pace her small living room. I can hear your thoughts from across the room. What if this is a mistake? Then it's your mistake to make. But it won't be. She set down her knitting. Tilly, you've been given a gift. Not just the restaurant, but the chance to show your children who you really are. Don't waste it on worry. 2 weeks before the opening, Dominic and Carlos invited me to a final walkthrough. Alexander and Yvonne came with me, and to my surprise, Yvonne brought all 3 of her daughters. The restaurant was transformed. The space felt both familiar and entirely new, the layout similar to what I'd had before, but everything elevated, improved, modernized. The kitchen gleamed with professional equipment I'd only dreamed of owning. The dining room had warm lighting, comfortable seating, and large windows that let in afternoon sun. And there, above the host stand, was my original sign, restored and mounted with care. Grandma, this is so cool, Sophie breathed, running her hand along the smooth wooden tables. Can we eat here every week? You can eat here whenever you want, I told her, my voice thick with emotion. Carlos showed us the final touches. A sound system for soft background music, a small waiting area with comfortable chairs, a updated point-of-sale system that Alexander had helped select. The staff starts training next week, Dominic said. You have 5 employees ready to begin. 3 from your old restaurant who heard you were reopening, and 2 new hires we think you'll like. I'd thought everyone from my old staff had moved on, found other jobs. The fact that some had waited, had wanted to come back, made my eyes sting with tears. There's one more thing, Carlos said, leading us to the back. He opened a door I'd assumed was storage, revealing a small office. Desk, computer, filing cabinets. Every restaurant owner needs a proper office. And look, he pointed to the wall, where a photograph had been framed and hung. It was the old picture from 1994. Maria, her son, and me, standing in front of the original bar's garden. So you never forget why this matters, Dominic said softly. I couldn't speak. I could only nod, tears streaming down my face. Yvonne put her arm around me. It's beautiful, Mom. All of it. Alexander was suspiciously quiet. When I glanced at him, he was wiping his eyes. "Dad would have loved this," he said finally. "He was always so proud of you. I think we forgot that. Yvonne and I. We forgot to be proud too. You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." The week before opening, I trained with my staff. 3 familiar faces: Linda, who'd been my prep cook for 12 years, Marco, who'd washed dishes and eventually learned the line, and Jennifer, my former hostess who'd left to raise her children and was now ready to return. The 2 new hires were young, eager, and reminded me of myself 40 years ago, hungry to learn, willing to work hard. We ran through the menu I'd developed with Alexander's help, a mix of traditional dishes and new offerings. We practiced timing, coordination, the dance of a working kitchen. My hands remembered the movements even as my back protested the long hours standing. But the familiar rhythm soothed something deep inside me. "You look happy," Linda observed during a break. "I haven't seen you this happy in years." "I thought I'd lost this," I admitted. "I thought it was over." "Nothing's over until you decide it is." Linda squeezed my shoulder. "I'm glad to be back, Tilly. I missed this. I missed working with you." Yvonne came by every afternoon that week, bringing Sophie. They both wore aprons, both wanted to learn. I taught them to fold dumplings, to achieve the perfect texture for fried rice, to balance the 5 flavors that made Chinese cooking sing. Sophie was a natural, her young hands quick and precise. "My teacher said I could do a project about you for social studies," Sophie told me, carefully pleating a dumpling wrapper. "About immigration and entrepreneurship and resilience." That's a lot of big words. I know what they mean, though. Immigration is coming to a new country. Entrepreneurship is starting a business. And resilience is— She paused, thinking. "It's getting back up when life knocks you down." "That's exactly right, sweetheart." "Is that what you did? Got back up?" I looked at this child, my granddaughter, seeing me clearly perhaps for the first time. "I tried to. Sometimes I got knocked down again, but I kept trying. That's what I'm going to write about, how you kept trying." The night before the grand opening, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Aunt Diane's living room, watching the city lights, thinking about all the paths that had led to this moment. Maria, desperate and pregnant, appearing at my door during a flood. My decision to help her, asking nothing in return. Her sons, spending a decade searching for me. The fire that had destroyed everything. And now this. A second chance. A new beginning, at an age when most people were winding down. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Kim, this is Carlos. Can't sleep either? Just wanted you to know. Our mother would be so happy right now. She always said kindness creates ripples we can't see. You're seeing the ripples now. Thank you for giving our family a chance. Tomorrow is going to be wonderful." I typed back. "Thank you for seeing me. For believing I still have something to offer. Your mother raised remarkable sons." His response came quickly. She learned from the best. The grand opening was scheduled for 5 o'clock. Dinner service, the busiest time. Alexander had handled the marketing, placing ads in local papers, posting on social media, reaching out to food bloggers. Yvonne had organized a soft opening the night before for family and friends, a practice run that had gone surprisingly well. But I was still terrified. I arrived at the restaurant at noon, wanting time to prepare, to settle my nerves. The staff was already there, everyone moving with purpose. Linda had prep under control. Marco was checking equipment. Jennifer was setting up the host stand, reviewing the reservation system Alexander had implemented. "We're fully booked," she told me, showing me the screen. "Every table for the first seating and most of the second. And there's a waiting list." My heart raced. Fully booked. I hadn't been fully booked in years. At 3 o'clock, Dominic and Carlos arrived with their families. I finally met their wives, Anna and Anna, warm women who hugged me like I was family. And their children, 7 kids total, ranging from age 5 to 16. "They've heard stories about you their whole lives," Anna said. "You're practically a legend in our family." The oldest, Dominic's daughter Sophia, looked at me with teenage solemnity. "My dad says you saved my grandmother's life." Is that true? I gave her a place to stay during a difficult time. Your grandmother saved her own life by being brave enough to leave a bad situation. Dad says you didn't have to help. That most people wouldn't have. Most people are kinder than they get credit for. I just happened to be in the right place at the right moment. Sophia considered this. I want to be like that. In the right place, ready to help. Then you will be. At 4:30, my family arrived. Alexander with Ashley and their 2 young children. Yvonne with Robert and the girls. Even Alexander's mother-in-law, Tilly, my namesake, who'd never shown much interest in me before. They all wore nice clothes, dressed for a celebration. We're proud of you, Grandma, Madison said, handing me a card the girls had made. It showed a crayon drawing of the restaurant with "We love you" written in glitter. I tucked the card into my apron pocket, kneading it close. At 5 o'clock, we opened the doors. The first customers were neighbors, people I'd served for years at the old location. They came with flowers and cards, with hugs and tears. We thought we'd lost you, Mrs. Henderson said, squeezing my hands. When the restaurant burned, we thought you'd leave the neighborhood. This is my home, I told her. I'm not going anywhere. The dining room filled quickly. I watched from the kitchen as Jennifer seated families, as servers took orders, as the space came alive with conversation and laughter. Through the window between kitchen and dining room, I could see Yvonne and Alexander at a large table with their families, talking and smiling. I could see the Rodriguez families at another table, their children well-behaved and curious, their parents beaming with pride. And then I saw Detective Johnson walk in, out of uniform, with a woman I assumed was her partner. She caught my eye and waved. I went out to greet her. I hope you don't mind us crashing your opening, she said. I wanted to see how the story ended, and my girlfriend has been dying to try your food ever since I told her about you. You're always welcome here, I told her. Tommy Brennan pleaded guilty, by the way. 15 years. He won't be burning down anyone else's business for a long time. The words should have brought satisfaction, maybe even joy. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of anger, tired of holding grudges. I hope he gets help. I hope he becomes someone different. Detective Johnson smiled. You're a better person than I am. The evening blurred into a beautiful chaos of cooking, serving, greeting customers. My feet ached. My back protested. But I felt more alive than I had in years. This was what I'd missed. The rhythm of service, the satisfaction of feeding people, the connection that happened over shared meals. Around 8 o'clock, during a brief lull, Dominic found me in the kitchen. Mrs. Kim, there's someone here who'd like to meet you. I followed him to the dining room, where an elderly couple sat at a corner table. The woman looked vaguely familiar, though I couldn't place her. Tilly, Dominic said. This is my Aunt Rosa, my mother's sister. She was there during the flood too, though you might not remember. She was living in Houston at the time, but she came to help look for Maria. The memory clicked into place. There had been someone else, an older woman who'd come to the restaurant a few days after I'd taken Maria in, frantic with worry, looking for her missing sister. I remember, I said slowly. You were so scared. You thought she'd drowned. Rosa stood, tears streaming down her face. You told me she was safe. You gave me your phone number and told me to call every day if I needed to hear her voice. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did. You were terrified. Maria called you an angel. She told me, God sent me an angel in the flood. Rosa took my hands. I've wanted to thank you for 30 years. When Dominic and Carlos found you, when they told me what happened with the fire, I knew I had to come. To tell you that what you did mattered, not just to Maria, but to our whole family. You gave us hope when we had none. We embraced, 2 old women connected by a moment of kindness decades ago, and I finally understood what Dominic and Carlos had been trying to tell me. It wasn't just about repaying a debt. It was about honoring a legacy of compassion, about keeping alive the memory of a woman who'd survived because someone chose to help. The restaurant stayed busy until we closed at 10. The last customers left reluctantly, promising to return soon. The staff cleaned up efficiently, everyone tired but satisfied. When everyone had gone except family, we gathered in the dining room, my children and grandchildren. the Rodriguez brothers and their families, Aunt Diane in a chair of honor. Dominic stood, raising a glass of sparkling cider. To Tilly Kim, to second chances, to the power of kindness, and to Maria, who taught us that what we do for others echoes through time. To Tilly, everyone echoed. I looked around the room at these faces. Some I'd known my whole adult life, some I'd met only months ago, all connected now by something deeper than blood or obligation. Connected by choice, by respect, by love earned and freely given. I want to say something, I said, standing on shaky legs. Everyone quieted. For a long time, I felt invisible. I felt like my life was shrinking, like I was becoming less important, less valued. My children didn't need me. My grandchildren barely knew me. My restaurant was failing. I thought maybe it was time to accept that my productive years were behind me. Yvonne made a small sound of protest, but I continued. And then my restaurant burned down. And I thought, this is it. This is the end. I've lost everything. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost a building. What I hadn't lost was the person I'd been 30 years ago. The person who saw someone in need and helped without hesitation. That person was still here, just buried under years of exhaustion and disappointment and feeling forgotten. I looked at Dominic and Carlos. You didn't just rebuild my restaurant. You reminded me of who I am. You showed my children who I am. You gave me back my purpose. You gave us our mother, Dominic said, his voice breaking. You gave her a chance to escape, to build a life, to raise us with dignity and hope. Everything we are, everything we've built, started in that storage room where you let her stay. We're just paying forward what you started. Alexander stood, clearing his throat. Mom, I need to say something too. I've spent the last few months watching you, really watching you, maybe for the first time in years. And I've realized something. I thought I was successful. I thought I'd made it. But I've never built anything like what you've built. I've made money. I've climbed corporate ladders. But I've never created a place where people gather, where families make memories, where you know your customers' names and their children's names and what they like to eat. He paused, struggling with emotion. You taught me to work hard, to be honest, to treat people with respect. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to respect you. I forgot to see that your work has value, maybe more value than mine because it touches people directly, feeds them, brings them joy. I'm sorry it took losing your restaurant to remind me. Ashley, Alexander's wife, spoke up. I never understood why Alexander talked about his childhood the way he did. He'd mention the restaurant, the long hours you worked, and his voice would get tight. I thought he resented you for working so much, but I realize now, he was proud. He was so proud and he didn't know how to show it because he thought he'd left that world behind. I was ashamed, Alexander admitted. Not of you, of myself. For wanting more than what you had. For thinking I was better because I wore suits and worked in an office. You're not better, I said gently. You're different. And there's nothing wrong with wanting a different life than the one you grew up in. But you're right. You forgot where you came from. You forgot the values that made you successful in the first place. Yvonne raised her glass. To remembering. To seeing each other clearly. To being the family Mom deserves. After everyone left, after the restaurant was dark and locked, I stood outside on the sidewalk, looking up at the sign. Bar's Garden. The same name, the same spirit, but reborn. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Grandma, I'm writing in my journal about today. I want to remember everything. You looked so happy. I want to make people that happy someday. I typed back, you already make me happy, just by being you, just by seeing me. A car pulled up, Dominic and Carlos, who'd offered to drive me back to Aunt Diane's apartment. I was moving into a small apartment above a bakery next week, a place of my own again. But for now, Aunt Diane's home was still my refuge. How do you feel? Carlos asked as we drove through the quiet streets. Tired, hopeful, grateful. I paused. Your mother would be proud of you both. Not just for what you've built professionally, but for who you are as men. For remembering kindness matters. She'd be proud of you, too, Dominic said. For starting over, for not giving up, for showing your family what strength looks like. When they dropped me off, both brothers hugged me tightly. This is just the beginning, Carlos said. You're going to do amazing things with this restaurant. I'm 72, I reminded him, laughing. Amazing things might be ambitious. You've already done amazing things. You just didn't realize it until now. Inside the apartment, Aunt Diane was still awake, waiting for me. Tell me everything, she demanded. I told her about the crowds, the food, the families, the tears and laughter. I told her about Alexander's speech, about Rosa's gratitude, about Sophie's journal entry. You did it, Aunt Diane said, squeezing my hand. You rebuilt more than a restaurant. You rebuilt your family. We rebuilt it together. They met me halfway. That's all anyone can ask. She stood carefully, ready for bed. I'm proud of you, Tilly. Gerald would be proud too. You honored his memory by not giving up. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. No anxiety about the future, no regrets about the past. Just peaceful, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I woke early and walked to the restaurant. The neighborhood was quiet, the sun just rising. I let myself in through the back door, turned on the lights, and stood in the kitchen. My kitchen, breathing in the smell of stainless steel and possibility. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album. The picture from 1994, Maria, her son, me. I studied her face, seeing now what I hadn't seen then. Not just fear and desperation, but determination. The same determination that had driven her to walk through floodwaters to find safety. The same determination that had led her sons to search for me for a decade. Thank you, I whispered to her image. Thank you for teaching your sons that kindness matters. Thank you for remembering me. My phone rang. Yvonne. Mom, the girls want to know if they can come help at the restaurant after school today. Sophie wants to learn more dishes, and Madison wants to draw pictures for the walls. Is that okay? More than okay. I'd love that. And Mom, I've been thinking about what you said last night, about feeling invisible. I never want you to feel that way again. So I'm going to be here. Really here. Not just when it's convenient, but when it matters. When you need me. I need you now, I said softly. I've always needed you. I just stopped asking. Then I'm here. We're here. All of us. After we hung up, I started my prep work for the day. Chopping vegetables, preparing sauces, getting the rice cooker ready. The familiar tasks grounded me, connected me to every other morning I'd done this work over 40 years. But this time felt different. This time I wasn't alone in it. This time I had my family behind me. Not just watching from the sidelines, but participating, learning, honoring what I'd built. This time, I wasn't invisible. The door chimed as Linda arrived for her shift. Morning, boss, she said, tying on her apron. Ready for day 2? Ready, I said. And I was. 3 months later, the restaurant had found its rhythm. We had regular customers, good reviews, a waiting list on weekends. My body had adjusted to the work, or at least found an accommodation with it. I hired an additional prep cook to ease the physical burden, and I'd learned to delegate more, to trust my staff. Yvonne and Sophie came twice a week to learn family recipes. Alexander stopped by every Friday to review the books and offer business advice that I sometimes took and sometimes ignored. The Rodriguez brothers visited monthly, always bringing their families, always leaving generous tips for the servers despite my protests. On a cold December evening, I stood at the kitchen window, watching the dining room fill with families celebrating the holidays. I saw parents sharing meals with children, elderly couples holding hands across tables, friends laughing over shared dishes. This was what I'd worked for, what I'd sacrificed for, what I'd almost lost. My phone buzzed. A message in a group chat Yvonne had created called Family. Alexander. Mom, we want to do something special for your birthday next month. Big celebration at the restaurant. Your 73rd deserves recognition. Yvonne. I'm already planning the menu with you, Mom. Your recipes, but I'll help cook so you can enjoy the party. Sophie. Can I make a speech? I finished my project about you and I want to share it. I typed back, You don't need to make a fuss. Alexander. We're making a fuss. You deserve a fuss. Yvonne. Get used to it, Mom. We're not letting you be invisible ever again. I smiled, slipping the phone back into my pocket. Jennifer appeared at the kitchen door. Tilly, there's someone asking for you. Says she's an old friend. I went out to the dining room. An elderly woman stood by the host stand, using a cane for support. She looked at me with eyes that held decades of memories. Tilly Barr, she said. Or Kim, I suppose. You probably don't remember me. We met briefly during the flood in 1994. I was volunteering at the emergency shelter. I didn't remember her specifically. There had been so many volunteers, so many people helping during that crisis. I heard about what you did, she continued, helping that pregnant woman and her child. And I heard about what her sons did for you, rebuilding your restaurant after the fire. She smiled, tears in her eyes. I volunteer at a women's shelter now. We help women escaping domestic violence. And I tell them your story. I tell them that kindness exists, that people do help, that there's hope. You've inspired more people than you know. I just did what anyone should do, I said, the familiar refrain. But not everyone does. That's what makes it matter. She handed me a card. If you ever want to volunteer, to share your story with the women we help, we'd be honored. They need to hear that life can get better, that strangers can become saviors. After she left, I stood holding her card, understanding finally what Dominic and Carlos had been trying to tell me from the beginning. The ripples of kindness spread farther than we can see. One moment of compassion 30 years ago had changed Maria's life, which had changed her sons' lives, which had changed my life, which was now changing others' lives. We don't always see the full impact of our actions. We don't always know who we're touching, who we're inspiring, who we're saving. We just have to keep choosing kindness, keep choosing to help, keep choosing to see the humanity in others. I returned to the kitchen, where Linda was plating orders with practiced efficiency. I picked up my knife and joined her, falling into the familiar rhythm of work that I loved. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the city in white. Inside, the restaurant glowed with warmth and life and the sound of people sharing meals. This was my legacy. Not just food, but connection. Not just survival, but community. Not just a business, but a place where people mattered. At 72, I had been given a second chance. But more than that, I had been given visibility, purpose, and the knowledge that my life had value beyond what I could see. The kindness I'd shown Maria had returned to me transformed, not just as a building, but as restored relationships with my children, newfound purpose in my work, and the understanding that we are never too old to matter, never too old to begin again, never too old to make a difference. As I worked that evening, surrounded by the sounds and smells of my restaurant, I felt my mother's spirit, my husband's love, and Maria's gratitude all around me. I felt the presence of everyone who'd shaped me, everyone I'd helped, everyone who'd helped me, and I felt, finally, fully seen. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.